About a year ago, the Center for International and Regional Studies made a strategic decision to engage in a number of partnerships with similar organizations around the region. And of course, it was natural for us to partner with the Issam CIRS Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs, because from the very beginning of my arrival here at Georgetown, the director of IFI, Rabi, has been a close friend, a trusted advisor, and a member of the CIRS advisory board. So for us, partnership with IFI has been a no-brainer. We are in many ways similar organizations, similar institutions that have similar profiles and similar objectives in engaging in analysis of regional topics and topics of relevance and importance. You might know Rami Khouri. He has been a distinguished speaker at CIRS and is here quite often when he's in town, but you may not necessarily know the rest of the IFI team, and also the details of our meeting here today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to IFI's Karim Makdisi, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Mehran, and thank you very much to Georgetown and to the Center for launching this event in cooperation with the Issam CIRS Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. As Mehran has said, there's been a lot of cooperation between these two institutes, and hopefully this cooperation will continue into the future with a number of different kinds of projects. I'm here in sort of two capacities. One is as the Associate Director of the Issam CIRS Institute. I'd like to introduce as well my colleague Nadim Farajallah, who's also the Director of the Climate Change Program, the Climate Change and Environment Program here at the Issam CIRS Institute, and as well my other colleague Rana Al-Hajj, who's the coordinator of this program. So just to introduce very quickly that at the Issam CIRS Institute, we have this program, this research and policy program on climate change in the Arab region. We're doing several different projects. They're on the website, and we can discuss that later because I know time is a bit compressed, so I'm not going to give a big speech about it. But we are doing a number of activities that might be of interest to people in this room. I'm honored to be moderating this panel, and before I introduce people, I want to just a quick word on the title, which is Who or What Drives Climate Change Policy in the Arab World? Clearly, this question is something that many of us have been thinking about for a while, and most of us, certainly me, don't have a clear answer. So we're trying to figure out how it is and why it is that suddenly the climate change has become a very important issue in this region, what the drivers are. Is it simply something that comes from sort of international sources and international pressure and pressure to want to come out and be part of this international community and to sort of go with the show? Or is there as well a number of domestic and internal players that are helping to drive this issue forward? And what is that dynamic and what is that relationship? So to introduce, and the introductions that I'm going to give to the panelists are going to be very, very brief, so I hope that's okay with the panelists, again, in the interest of time. Our first speaker will be Roula Majdalani, who's the director, currently the director of the Sustainable Development and Productivity Division at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for West Asia. And Roula has been at ESCOR for a number of years in a number of capacities, and is doing, I can say doing some great work, and the division is doing great work in assessing and writing about and following up on all issues to do with sustainable development in the region. Ms. Majdalani was in a previous life, she obtained a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Syracuse University, so rival to Georgetown, and previously worked with the Dar al-Handasa consultants in Lebanon. Roula will be talking about the role of the state. With events in the region, we thought important to talk about, there's a lot of discussions about what role states play. Obviously, states in international relations remain the key actor, but in this region, the role of the state itself is transforming and potentially changing. And I think it's important to have to refocus on what this role of the state in the current period is. So Roula will be speaking to that. Our second speaker will be Dr. Rabi Mohtar, and he's the Executive Director of the Qatar Energy and Environment Research Institute, obviously here in Doha. Before joining the Qatar Foundation, Professor Mohtar founded the Global Engineering Program at Purdue University in Indiana, where he was also a professor of environment and natural resources engineering since 1996. He's worked on a number of issues, especially on the connection between water and energy and food, and that nexus and the interlinkages between these three important areas. Dr. Mohtar will talk about, again, something which is of obviously extreme importance to the region and in general, as a potential driver anyway for policy in the region, which is of course the role of science. Clearly, in textbooks and in normal discussions, science should be the basis for any kind of proper policy in environment and climate change areas. Whether or not science has been at the forefront within the Arab region, not so much for the quality of the science, but in terms of being able to connect and reach its message to the policymakers and the decision makers, is an issue. But clearly now, with a number of new institutes and more focus on the role of science, this is going to become a very important issue. And so Dr. Rabia is going to be talking to that. Finally, the third speaker to my left here will be, and I apologize that Wael Ahmeidan, who is the director of CAN and previously of IndyACT, was unable to attend, but we're very happy to have in his place Lama Hatow. And Lama is a climate policy officer with IndyACT, which is the League of Independent Activists, formed in Beirut, but I would imagine easily the most active civil society group, in particular dealing with climate change, and has been tracking and following the climate negotiations and various parts of climate policy for a number of years now. So they have an accumulated experience working from the civil society side. Lama is currently also doing her PhD on climate and water in Egypt, and will speak to obviously the role of civil society, which again is something which is talked about often, but it's not quite clear what exactly they're doing and what the challenges are in trying to reach the decision makers and the policy makers on the intersection. So it'll be very important to hear that perspective as well. So I look forward to the discussion. We're going to try, in the interest of time, to keep it as compressed as possible, given I think we only have an hour or so. So I'll ask each speaker to talk between 5 and 8 minutes or so, and I'll try to be as strict as I can. So my apologies in advance. Roula, please.
Thank you, Karim, for this introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. In my intervention, I will make a strong a case for why we need the state, and actually more than ever in this region, and from the perspective of climate change. I will start by, before, of course, I think it's a very timely debate at present to talk about the state, but what state are we talking about? Which state? Who does it represent? How much of the state? Especially in the context of what we have been seeing recently in the region, the dismantling of maybe the security apparatus, the dismantling of the regime. But I don't think there is on the table a dismantling of the state per se. In fact, I think there is a strong argument for having the state, and probably the issue of climate change makes a strong point for that. Climate change in and by itself requires a strategic role of the state, in the sense that you really have to think about this ability of working through complex governance structures, working at an interministerial level, working in a long-range perspective, working on issues that are transboundary. And in that sense, it really is, the state is a key interlocutor in this process of negotiations. The state the role of the state in addressing, in driving climate change policies, the first maybe entry point would be the issue, or to argue for the issue of the sovereignty. The state represents sovereignty. The state in the Rio principle, the second principle in the Rio Declaration, the state has a very clear role to safeguard and preserve and in fact and utilize and has full sovereignty over natural resources. For this region, this is a unique issue. For this region, the issues of water, energy are vital and as precious as life. So the state has a clear role to exploit these issues, but also to make sure that these issues, the use and exploitation of natural resources are done without harm to other neighboring states. And here comes an issue of clearly on the agenda of the climate change. To what extent within that ecosystem, that sovereignty allows a negotiation space with neighboring countries. To what extent development processes results in carbon emissions, and the role of the state in ensuring that whatever development is done in or well negotiated with its neighbors. The question of legitimacy is again a paramount on the agenda, and probably in this region again the demand that we have seen, the delegitimizing of the state in the uprising, through the uprising process, puts us in front of very clear challenges. The state has the responsibility, has the obligation to serve its people, to address challenges that result, and in the context of climate change, challenges of extreme events, of floods, of droughts. The state is at the forefront to address these issues. Also, the state has the responsibility in order, in legitimizing its role, to negotiate on issues of, for example, on COP18, the Rio +20 process, what is it getting out of the international community? How does it want to play itself and be in harmony with the international community? So in that sense, there is a strong case for us, and in this region there is increasing realization, maybe not as much as we hope for, maybe not because of the challenges that we are facing. The issues of climate change, of the environment, have been relegated to a second stage. However, there is increasing realization that this is an important platform that we have not fully tapped as a region. For example, having the president of the G77 from Algeria has played and he has played a proactive role in that process, realizing that there are important platforms where they can tap into. Actually, the chair of the ad hoc working group on long-term cooperative action is from Saudi Arabia, and he has been active in this process, and they have been active in consolidating or rallying other Arab states in this process to get an Arab stand, even though it has not been up to expectation. The state also has a crucial role for mobilizing financing, appropriating finance, negotiating finance mechanisms, implementing them, monitoring overseas ODA. Access to green fund and access to the CDM, for example, is a crucial role where the state can be instrumental in playing that role. However, if we look at the performance of the region, we find that it has not been that forthcoming in terms of getting access to these finance. But I would like to argue also that this is a shared, the blame is not just on the Arab state, but also on the fact that these funds, the pledges, have been out there but not forthcoming. and on the lack of transparency in that have been noted in managing some of these funds. So here, I don't want to underplay the responsibility and maybe the potential for the Arab state, but also to say that it's a shared responsibility. The last point I would like to make is that the state has a very important role in mobilizing investments and ensuring the transfer of technology. This is, I will not get a lot into that, but I just want to say that what we have seen so far, especially in the wake-up throughout the the COP process, but also in other fora like the negotiations for Rio +20, we have seen some important initiatives happening in the region. Initiatives to, for example, to adopt a greener production process, to adopt, to promote renewable energy, to attract foreign direct investment, to engage in public-private partnership. However, these have remained, or for example, in the Gulf region, we see a lot of interest and increasing interest, for example, in carbon capture and sequestration and storage. So we see some initiatives, but up until now, they remain discrete, experimental, and not really thought out in well integrated plans that can identify the finances required, different scenarios, capacity development required, the institutional setup, within a well thought out, and how they can benefit from each other. So this is, I think it's a unique opportunity. I might sound a bit over-optimistic, but I think it's a unique opportunity to rethink what is the state, to reinvent the Arab state. I think it has very clear roles that we would want from an accountable state, a transparent state that has that builds on solid grounds and solid institutions. To quote, for example, a great author, Nazih Ayyubi, I think he has made the point very clear that we have been used to in this region to strong in the sense of fearful state or force-related state, but not really strong in their capacity to plan strategically and to trust and build and be inclusive and bring on board what other stakeholders could contribute. I think the opportunity is very big. I from a regional commission, and that is really based on an intergovernmental process. As ESCWA, we really function through bringing this, the intergovernmental process through, and believing very strongly in an Arab or regional position. I would like to make the argument in conclusion for regional cooperation as an entry point to enhance the role of the state, to ferment the good ideas that are and the good initiatives that are emerging as regional initiatives. For example, I would like to quote, there has been through the Council of Arab Ministers responsible for environment and the Arab ministers responsible for water, and through our own intergovernmental body at ESCWA, the Committee on Water, Committee on Energy, initiatives that really support this collective thinking in addressing climate change. For example, I don't have more time. I would like to conclude with this note that there are different initiatives. This is not to, and one of them is actually the regional initiative on climate change adaptation that we will be presenting tomorrow. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you all tomorrow to this session. But this is not to underplay the responsibilities and the role of the state at the national level, but to say that a regional platform is a good solid entry point to build on these initiatives, because at the end of the day we have to make choices. I don't think the world is going to wait for us until we rediscover that environment is important, climate change is important, maybe not as urgent and critical as what we are witnessing as a result of the uprising, but they are important because they are not going to wait for us, and the problems that are coming as a result of lack of attention to them are irreversible. And with that, I would like to, I will conclude by saying that yani there is hope for a reinvented state that we should all be thinking about. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for AUB and for Georgetown for putting this together and for giving me the opportunity to talk. I will focus on the role of science. I was asked by Nadeem to really speak about the role of science. And the question I raise, you hear a lot about adaptation and mitigation. So the core question I ask every one of us, adapt to what and mitigate what? And I hope that the message throughout my presentation would leave you with this big question, because adaptation and mitigation is not coming from the UNCCC, or it's coming from an internal process of science and the guidance of science, so that's what I'm going to tell you about. But before we get there, I'd like to introduce who we are, and I'll stick to the 8 minutes as much as I can. I belong to Qatar Foundation. The Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute is a member of Qatar Foundation, and there are 3 pillars, education pillar. So Georgetown is a sister organization that belongs to the education arm of Qatar Foundation, and I belong to the science and research arm, and there's a 3rd arm, which is the community development. So if I focus on actually there was some missing slides maybe, or some, so if I focus on the science portion of the Qatar Foundation, there are 3 institutes, and Qatar Energy Environment Research Institute is one of the 3 research institutes, the other 2 computing and biomedical, and the 2 other sister organizations that belong to the presidency of R&D are the Qatar National Research Fund. That's the bank that all of you are maybe familiar with, that fund external research, and the Qatar Science and Technology part that complements what the research do in terms of deployment of technology. And of course, some of you have heard of Roula and heard of a lot of the community engagement that Qatar Foundation has. One of the significant things that happened over the last 2 months at Qatar Foundation is the creation or the launching of the Qatar National Research Strategy that really, in a nutshell, does uphold a lot of what we're talking about today in terms of the R&D capacity for adaptation and mitigation. I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but you have to trust me, you can't read this, but I'm telling you that this is the core of the sustainability research that enables the question that I posed earlier, which is adapt to what and mitigate what. So let me drill deeper into the question of adapt to what. This is a standard picture many of us have seen. It shows a very key message. Yes, the climate is getting hotter, the extremes in terms of climate are getting hotter, but that doesn't tell us where and how, and that doesn't really get to the question about local. This is a global data set that was used, that has been proven that yes, there's no doubt that the climate is changing. The question that I ask myself is, what does it do to me at the local scale? So I'm going to put some of the drivers to what we see. Now, what exacerbates this problem, I mean, the significance in my mind for COP18 to be in Doha, the most significant things in my judgment is that the population growth, the stresses on, you mentioned the food security, the water security, the energy security, the stresses on the planet is not happening in Germany, nor is it happening in North America. It's happening right here, because that's where the population growth is expanding in our region. That's where the highest per capita consumption of water, that's the highest per capita consumption of energy. So that's another dimension of where are the drivers that I see for climate change. And if you look at another driver, which is the food security driver, most of us, if you look at, there's no one single country in the whole region that is self-sufficient. I think there was one country, which was Syria, and what used to be Syria that was sufficient in food production. I don't think that's going to survive healthy after with what is happening. I'm not going to go into politics, but the food-water nexus is extreme drive for climate change and climate change research that we should be focusing on. And I think the key message here is dryland agriculture, that the technology that my ancestors grew up with, knowing how to produce food with minimum input has been lost, because all of us are bringing in these magnificent, huge machine and doing which I believe is not adapted to the community. Anyway, that's another drive. And the other key message is in this whole conflict against water, we're heading on a head-on crash. And the message, take-home message here, we really need to be looking at having agriculture not a competitor to our domestic water supply. And that's where really what we promote as green water becoming the new bucket we're going to use for looking at somehow the slide is not showing as I wanted it to be, but the core here is that if you look at the water security issue in the region, 52% of desalination in the world is happening in the 6 countries in the GCC. 52% is expected to go to 60% in the next few years. All of that is a hungry for fossil fuel, because our technology today is predominantly fossil fuel. The other issue is that if we are going to do something about food security, we really need to be looking at a cleaner way of generating water. So the energy, if you're looking at the overarching policy questions, energy production and use, we're looking at environment and climate change, and more importantly, the global national security. A few weeks ago, Doha hosted the food security in dryland, and I heard it loud and clear for more of the policymakers that food security is about national security. And if we as a science community don't hear this, we would be missing an opportunity. We will be talking about, okay, is it feasible for us to plant? Is it feasible for us to have domestic production? From a policy standpoint, it's about national security, and I think we have to find solutions to be more sustainable. So those are some of the drivers, and I'd like to move from the drivers into the key question I started with. We don't have R&D to answer these questions. I'll read those aloud, and then we can decipher those in the discussion. The need for a climate model use that is locally developed and for the region, and specifically for arid and semi-arid regions. Looking at trends in observed climate signals. If I look at the data that generated only on the Nile River Basin, 50% of the data shows increase in water yield, 50% shows decrease in water yield. That tells me that the science is still far from being accurate in these areas. A lot of assumptions that need to be looked at. So the signals, is the water are we gonna have more floods or less floods? So that's where really I'm going down to that regional adaptation. Before we do adapt to what, we need to know what are we adapting to, get the science in front. A frequency of hot days and length of hot season. Imagine if Doha gets 2 more degrees in the next 50 years, or it has 2 extra days in the hot season, how much that's gonna do to the energy security, how much energy we'll be spending. Those are critical questions that we need to do the research for here locally. Future changes in rainfall pattern, we don't know. Traditionally, yes, Doha receives 80 millimeter per year. It happens in few weeks. Lebanon, depending where you are, it receives 700, 800, sometimes 900. We don't even know what the distribution of that rainfall is going to be. We know that it's going to change. The biggest question for us here in the GCC countries is dust. And that dust, from looking at few observations, few of the initial results that will be showing that yes, dust is increasing, the frequency of dust storms is increasing, but what does that do to the health? And we're promoting big time the solar energy research. That dust storms is affecting the efficiency of water generation from solar and affecting the efficiency of the solar cells. Looking at seawater fluctuations, that's a big issue. And then with if I want to take a global view, how much of the world would be flooded underwater in the next 50 years? That's a $1 million question. There was one program on NPR the other day that some areas in this Southeast Asia, are the price for houses are dropping down dramatically because people don't want to buy in an area that's vulnerable, at least to see water fluctuations. The impact on water security, the impact, we talked about the Nile and the Bangladesh example with property becoming really cheap. And last but not least, adaptation. So before we look into adaptation, we need to have a host of answers that we must look at at the regional, and I would agree that there has to be a regional effort, but also at the local. I won't speak much about this, except that we are at least embarking on initial study that look into the effect of climate change on dust and dust storms. And I'm not going to bore you with a lot of technical details, but this is some of the platform which I believe is, as a scientist, is a really innovative platform. We can talk about it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. So I've actually been invited here to speak on behalf of sort of the civil society engagement and the role that civil society can also play by affecting and influencing climate change policy in this part of the world. And it's no secret, really, that civil society in the Arab region has very much, for a very long time, been almost dormant and ceased to exist for a very long time, based on the fact that a lot of our governments have, due to the oppressive nature of a lot of our governments, and because of the nature of the way that the Arab region functions in its social structures. That has significantly changed with the Arab uprisings that have occurred starting from 2 years ago. We've begun to see a lot of civil society empowerment, and that in itself is extremely powerful. That in itself has actually created, in the span of a year and a half and 2 years, this enormous amount of civil society and NGOs engagement within the process, and people coming out and beginning to speak, and not just on climate change policy, but on every aspect, human rights and democracy, in every single aspect. But that being translated into the civil society movement. So for a very long time, I'm personally, on behalf of IndyACT, I represent the League of Independent Activists, which is an NGO based in Beirut, in Lebanon. And for a very long time, this NGO was probably the primary and only NGO speaking in the climate change negotiations and in the COPs and actually influencing climate policy for a very long time. I would have to say that since the Arab uprisings, this has seriously changed, and that there's a lot more engagement in the process, and civil society is beginning to speak up and wanting to make a difference in this part of the world. Recently, actually, about 3 months ago, we launched the Arab Youth Climate Movement, which is a movement that has now encompassed youth and civil society from all over the Arab world. We have people from GCC, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia. We have youth from Morocco, all the way spanning until Egypt and Lebanon. It's very, very powerful to see that now coming to these negotiations, as opposed to being only 2 or 3 civil society from the Arab world, we're here with more than 100. This is a very, very powerful statement to say that this is the very first COP to ever happen in the Middle East, in Qatar, and for Qatar to actually to stand up to the plate and take a leadership role in this, and for the youth to be a very pivotal part of that process and take a leadership role with them. And that in of itself, I think, is very exciting. So I wanted to talk about as well sort of the leadership that I think that the COP presidency and also the Qatari presidency could potentially also take within this COP. And that being said, there's numerous amounts of efforts that are being done locally in terms of strategies and solar power plants, and the UAE a few days ago was demonstrating its national strategies for a 100 megawatt solar power plant, and the Qataris, Mr. Fahd Al-Hatawi, was also discussing how a lot of their strategies internally and what they're doing with their solar power plants and transportation projects for public transportation. These are all fantastic initiatives and very, very inspiring in this part of the world, and really shows great initiative towards how the Arab world can really step up and take a lead when it comes to these kinds of clean technologies and innovations and R&D, like Mr. Rabi Mohtar was talking about. And that's precisely what we want to show, that we can really become a pillar and a leader and take a leadership role in these kinds of engagement. So how can we begin to translate that now into the COP negotiations and begin to translate that into actual progress with make COP actually become a successful COP and what we can define as a successful COP to move forward? And it really also depends on how much, a lot of the controversy also stems from developed versus developing country sort of pledges and mitigation actions. And I think at this point in time, it would really make a lot of difference if we had regional pledges from our Arab governments stepping up to the plate here in Qatar and making the statement that we are here with our limited capacities, with our revolutions and people in the streets making protests, and we're here still with whatever capacity that we have to make that kind of ambition here in Qatar, to say that we are as progressive as we stand and are willing to make that kind of a commitment. And that would really resonate a long way. That would really resonate a long way within the COP negotiations and in future progress to build trust and faith in these negotiations to move forward. At the end of the day, we're not the only ones that are impacted. Mr. Mohtar was just mentioning it's not going to happen in Zimbabwe or in China or in the US alone. This is something that's going to impact every single one of us in every single part of the Arab world and every single part in every region. So we really need to begin now. I also wanted to discuss a little bit towards basically the role and how civil society can be a very pivotal part as a watchdog. Government actions are, to give them the benefit of the doubt, tend to move in the direction of our best interests and always are inclined to move in the direction of giving us our best interests as civil society. Whether that is the case or not in some regimes and some others, that may not necessarily be the case. I'm not here to have a discussion specifically on specific Arab governments and whether that stands or not. But what I am here to say is that civil society's role, the most important part, is to ensure that, in fact, whatever the government stance is, whether it be in the climate negotiations or otherwise, is there to ensure, as a watchdog or a checks and balances system, that there is that network that is provided to be able to ensure that whatever is occurring is, in fact, in the best interest of both the citizens and domestic issues, domestic concerns of their citizens, and for the global good. And when I mention the global good, a civil society from here is also representing the climate movements, are not just Arab youth, but they're also youth from around the world. And this is something very significant, is that civil society engages in a process that is cross borders. It's not really just youth from the Arab world. Arab youth have a very strong voice, and I'm very, very proud to actually have them here with us in the COP. But this is a moment in time where we can actually all begin to cross our borders down and actually begin to move in a trajectory that all of us combine together for one global good. And that's where civil society really can combine its efforts and push our governments towards that one common cause. I think media, this is my last point, I know I don't have any time left, media also has a very important role to play in this, and how media can actually really begin to take that sort of stance of impartiality, whether it be in relaying what civil society is doing or in relaying what in terms of governments can do. 2 days ago, December 1st, there was a march here in Qatar, coordinated by IndyACT and Arab Civil Society and the Arab Youth Climate Movement with the Qatari government, of course, and the COP presidency. And this being said, this was the very first march that has ever been conducted here in Qatar. And I think that being said is a huge, tremendous effort and a very big step forward for both Qatar and for civil society in this region to actually make that stance. And there was enormous amounts of people coming out and resonating. The march was a great success, and there's YouTube clips and press and media, and if you go online, I'm sure you'll see enormous amounts of pictures of youth holding up banners saying, "Arabs, we want you to take the lead." And it's very, very inspiring, so please do go online and see those. But I think the fact that this is the very first time in our region that we've had the Qatari government work in coordination with the civil society to actually conduct a march, and it being the first march to actually occur in this part of the world, is a huge step for our governments. And that's the kind of leadership that I really want to take forward within this COP to progress and really have a successful COP here in Qatar. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to discussion, Mehran would like to introduce the Dean.
Let me just take this opportunity to introduce our Dean, Gert Noneman, who's here. Gert is a scholar of the region, and we're delighted to have him here. Thanks.
So thank you very much for the three panelists for very interesting interventions, and thank you for keeping more or less within time. I'd like I'd just like to open it up for discussion since we have about 15 or 20 minutes. So if you don't mind keeping your interventions relatively short, that would be great as well. Please. And if you could introduce yourselves as well.
Hatow from QEERI with Dr. Rabi. Thank you for the speakers. I would like to ask Ms. Majdalani, please. Now, I'm of course, we are all, I guess, firm believers in regional cooperation, and we all know that when you do a project for UNDPs and these international organizations, nowadays always at the end of the project there is how are you going to sustain the outcome of the project after the funding is over from that funding agency. And you very correctly talked about enhancing the regional cooperation. And we know very well that especially ESCWA is taking a very, very strong role in this regard. And I myself, among many others, have done several studies on regional cooperation. One of them was on land degradation. And so really, how is this being followed up with the Arab states, with the countries themselves? Is it really a forceful follow-up, or just,
Roula, in the interest of time, again, can we take maybe a couple more questions and then have people answer, I think, please.
My name is Majdalani, and I'm a researcher on water and environmental politics from Palestine. And my question is to Mr. Rabi. And the idea is that you talked about science, but I would like also to ask you about social science, and to what extent is it important to look at the politics aspects of climate change, especially in regions under conflict like Palestine, and also in the Arab world as well. And to what extent is research and policy important, because we've developed our science to some extent, and the Arab world is known for that, but social science, I think, is also very important.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I remember in 1991 doing a collective study on regional integration in the Middle East, and including in the Gulf, whole sections about the Gulf. And there was a chapter which I ended up writing about environmental cooperation in the Gulf, and there were various bodies around at that time. But of course, and something in terms of protection of water, bodies of water, there were some results were achieved in at least coordination. But to go back to maybe link a couple of these things together, unless it's all very well having regional initiatives, but very often there is either zero follow-up or the follow-up is empty. As long as one doesn't have a combination of national willingness at the governmental level and at the civil society level, and these two things coming together. And I suppose in the past one's had a picture whereas there's been fledgling interest in such issues in some countries, in others there's not only been no interest, there's been interest in countering whatever else was happening. I think the case of Saudi Arabia has been, until not so long ago, quite clear. Mohammed Sabban, the main advisor on environmental and energy policies, he'd been notorious for years for always going, trying to stop any movement on discussion of climate change and so on. The interesting thing, and that's where I think maybe there is an element of hope, is, and this can be supported by civil society emerging, is that partly under pressure of global media, globalization, the need for states to be seen to step up to the plate globally, otherwise it's very bad publicity. Gradually, you see some fledgling movements where even Mohammed Sabban has come out with a couple of statements that aren't so bad. And one of the things, just to finish up with that, is we've got the editor-in-chief of a journal called Adyan, or Religions, Patrick Lord, and that's published from the Docker Center for Interfaith Dialogue. And this issue, the latest issue that's just come out, is precisely on ecological, I think it's called ecological responsibility. And interestingly, it's not just the fact that Qatar is hosting COP, and that Abdallah Atiyah, with his background in QP, energy, a very traditional view in the old days, is leading this effort. He's written the foreword in this journal, all about ecological responsibility and the need to address the consequences of climate change. So even though I start from a very skeptical positions. Maybe there's just a little bit of fledgling hope as long as people keep being reminded, not least by civil society.
Any last questions? Okay.
Thank you. Actually, the argument is not, if you want, the regional as opposed to the national. There is definitely a role for the national. And maybe the point I was making is that there is a lot of wealth of knowledge. There are solid initiatives that have been taken, whether on climate change mitigation, disaster addressing, Carol, help me, the initiative, the regional initiative for disaster risk reduction, on water security, on energy. There are positioning that I think Arab states are realizing that there is an untapped space that they have not really fully used, and they are coming to grips with it. I think that and you are absolutely right, there is the problem of follow-up is always there, and it's a challenge. And like Dr. Muhammad said, it is, the point you have raised, it's an uphill fight. It's really an uphill fight, but we have no other alternative. And actually, it makes the role even more challenging now for these regional bodies in this period of great transformation to really hold the bases and build on these. But we are talking here about the need, I mean, the responsibility is shared. It's not just on the regional bodies. It is on the national institutions. It's on the civil society. It's on the scientific community. And we see more now, if you want, an opening up space for being more inclusive. You see on these negotiation teams, for example, people from the academic world, people who are scientists who in earlier time were kept out. We are working on from different initiatives, whether your initiative or the initiative we are doing on regional climate change modeling, for example, to really develop information-based or to enhance information-based policy making. So I think that the ingredients are there. It's not an easy process, but we have no choice but work through any avenue that we have. I'm proposing a regional perspective as an entry point, but it's not there to substitute for the state.
Yes, colleague from Palestine. I 100% agree with your first part of the comment, and I disagree with the last part of the comment. I do feel that the social sciences need to be very much integrated in our science. When I say science, I'm not defining science as physical sciences only. In fact, we had the QNRS that I mentioned earlier. There were the engineers and scientists and the social scientists hand in hand developing that QNRS, so at least as a model for Qatar. So we certainly need to have the social sciences working hand in hand with the physical sciences for better policy making. So that part, I 100% agree. We can talk about this maybe in depth. But the second part of your comment, that we have as if we reached a state where we can be proud of our science, I disagree. If you look at the UNESCO report, any other report, any index, any indicator, whether it's number of papers, whether it's patents, whether it's technology developed in the region, we don't have any. The only place that I think we should be proud of that are developing technology is Gaza. It's not patented, it's not developed, but because they need safe water, so they're developing with little things. But the global index for publications, for research productivity, for patent, for technology development doesn't exist in the region. So unless we recognize that, to build the capacity for us, we're not going to make it in. Now, is there a contradiction between your first part and the second part? Absolutely not. We need to work together to develop adaptive technology that works for us. that is not going to be imported. So I think the short answer is yes, absolutely we do. There's a couple, if I may build on the discussion that we have here, because of the regional nature of climate change, there might be an opportunity to look at climate change as an integrator to promote regional partnership. Water is another integrator in many of the basins that we see. I think this is significant, and maybe we can use this platform, as you indicated earlier, to promote scientific cooperation. And sciences is not only physical scientists, at all levels of scientists. Last but not least, I do agree with the team that the significance of Qatar hosting this. If you look in history, who were the people who said, I'm gonna make a peace deal with you? Those are who have been in war. Say, I've done this. I've been in war. Now I've seen the damage of war. Now I can make a peace deal with you. I think the significance of the chairman of the COP18 having been in the oil and gas industry, trying to pledge and facilitate the pledges for national pledges to bridge that gap that we were talking about, I think is very significant. I think it's significant for Qatar to lead that discussion and debate is extremely significant, and we need to build on it.
Thank you. And just to pick up on that theme, we at IFI is trying to come up with a research project, in fact, that tries to think about how natural sciences and social sciences should be linked in a much more effective way. Because I agree that while many of us might say it, in fact, even to this day, it's very, very difficult to find social scientists in the region working on these kinds of issues. And I think, while hopefully there will be more and more that will come out in places like Georgetown and other places like this, it's something that needs to be working together, not the science agendas being then the social sciences sort of unrelated and going on a separate track. The point is to try to find a way that connects these two, and I think this is a very important agenda for the future. I'll leave, unless there are any questions, I'll leave a word for Lama.
Thank you. I actually wanted to comment on what you were discussing when it comes to sort of discussing the integration that can occur between both the governments and civil society, and I fully agree with you. And this is also building upon what Ms. Roula was mentioning. When we come to these climate negotiations, there's a lot of complexities. It's very, very technical in a lot of different, and there's different work plans, there's different tracks, there's so many different complexities and technical issues that are being dealt with. And I think that that's a very heavy responsibility and a very heavy burden on our negotiators to deal with. And in some instances, they do, of course, have a lot of the capacity, but because of funding reasons or budgetary constraints, they may not necessarily have sufficient personnel or human resources to be able to cover all tracks and cover all issues. And this is something that we've been able to actually benefit from our African colleagues and see how they've been able to turn this around in a very positive light by incorporating civil society engagement in their African delegations to be able to assist them and support them when it comes to technical expertise and otherwise where they have necessarily been lacking. In the Arab world, we've yet to see that. We've yet to see that kind of positive integration when it comes to not just the negotiators, but the negotiation process. And I think that that's something that's seriously lacking and really needs to be improved upon in this part of the world. So moving forward, I think that this is a step. I think that this is a step forward for Qatar and for this part of the world, but I think that there's a lot that really needs to be addressed still.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Karim. I work with Roula. I'm chief of the Water Resources section right there. And I just wanted to highlight something with you, the audience here, the students, professors at Georgetown. What's so new and what the civil society has been able to galvanize is youth who have access to information. That is the change, that is the breaker. It's not only the Twitter, but that actually people read, use science, use information to influence policy. I can tell you 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, that was not necessarily the case. Often it was more of a gut feeling, a political stance. So the ability to use and access information that is available now in institutions like this to make mobility, to make change is important. But it's really in the end the state that has to make the negotiation position, the state that has to argue. So I just wanted to highlight for those of you that have a badge to get across the street to the negotiations, the intergovernmental negotiations going on across the street. ESCO is working with a host of international organizations, UN, League of Arab States, etc., to create the science through a regional climate modeling scheme that includes the Gulf region to Morocco, to Iraq, to Sudan, and down even to Comoros, so that we can all look at regional modeling outputs together and be informed of the impacts and informed about the socioeconomic vulnerabilities so that you can have the information to make your arguments. Because it's good to argue something, but it's better to have arguing with justification. And so I hope that those of you who are able to cross the street and are registered will join us to a side event tomorrow that Roula had mentioned during our presentation and have some information to see how science is being developed at the Arab regional level to inform decision making, to understand vulnerabilities, socioeconomic vulnerabilities of climate change on water, on development, on population movements, etc., so that you would have the information to help influence government in their way forward.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. I should add that both myself and Carol are Georgetown graduates, so that's why I gave her the final word here. So thank you to the panelists for some excellent interventions, and for the audience for this very interesting discussion. I'd like to turn it back to Mehran to perhaps wrap it up. But I'd also like to recognize Zahra for her work here and for organizing this, as well as Rana. They're the ones who actually organized this event. So thank you to both.
You actually took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to thank our respective bosses for making this possible and for their efforts. And this is a topic of tremendous interest and importance. And this joint initiative between our two respective institutions is indicative of the importance that we all collectively attach to the topic. So I want to thank IFI for the wonderful partnership we've had, and thank you all for being here. Thanks.